Howdy, folks. Today we are going to continue our work in analyzing structure and development of a text by taking a look at how context and meaning behind that context affect an author's structure. So if we look at our big goals for this unit is I can analyze with support how a person's structural choices contribute to a text's overall meaning. What we're going to focus on today is this idea of what is the overall meaning of a text, because there's a lot of things that go into making that kind of meaning heard. There's both the explicit, I have to understand exactly what's happening in this text, whatever it is I'm reading. And there's also the inferential, which means, okay, I didn't physically see this happening, but this is the point behind this. This is the idea that this author or this artist is trying to convey to me. So one of the things we'll take a look at is historical context. And you'll notice that on my opening slide, I had a picture that you'll probably recognize. That's my picture of a person's mental schema. So all these nodes represent something that you know, and all these lines connect what you know about that thing and how it connects to other things. And this becomes really, really important when we start talking about meaning in a historical context, because art and language and anything isn't created in a vacuum, meaning that there are all sorts of these outside forces, modern events, historical events, a person's own preference and bias that go into creating this. So if we understand a little bit about the time period in which something was created, that helps us understand a deeper meaning of the text or whatever it is we're trying to look into. So we are going to take a quick read through some background information on the Salem witch trials. Our next big thing that we're going to read and watch actually is a play called The Crucible, which is about witches in the late 1600s. And so we have to understand a little bit about like what was going on in this time period that's being written about in order to understand a little bit more deeply about what's going on with the play. Because if we're taking a look at like how and why the Crucible was created, which is going to be one of our overall goals, we have to understand this idea of there's a subject, okay, what's being written about, who is doing the writing, and then who is it being written for? This sort of triangle all influences each other in how that meaning is created within a text. So a little bit of background information just increases our knowledge, our schema of the subject of which we're reading, allowing us to make deeper connections. So that's step one. There information posted up on our Google Classroom. And second thing we're going to take a look at is this idea of thematic context, right? So if I were to look at the subject and say, this is the subject of what explicitly is there, like this is a play about the Salem witch trials, it is, but it's also about so much more. It's about the themes and the elements that kind of are not directly stated, but we can see through analyzing the story. So I've got kind of this chart here where you can kind of see there's the plot, that's literally what happens. There's the story, which is kind of the internal and external conflicts of the characters. And then there's this idea of the theme, which is like the universal lesson or message that the author is trying to convey through this story. Because a lot of times, if an author was just to say, hey, this is what I think, that's actually not as effective as telling a good, interesting, intricate story that goes into depth and explores kind of the human reaction to some of these theme ideas. So just to get your brain working, we're going to look at some of the themes that you could possibly pull out and talk about for the Crucible. So I'm just going to go through them and you can kind of gauge where you are on this thematic scale. So for example, one of the themes in this play is that privacy is more important than safety, or flip it around, safety is more important than privacy. So if you agree that privacy is more important than safety, maybe you're leaning over here. Yeah, we've got to protect people from other people, right? And if you bring a gun to school, that's not a privacy issue. That's a public health risk, right? We need to know these things. Or maybe you disagree. Maybe you think privacy is more important than safety. Like what's mine is mine, and you or the government doesn't have any right to it. unless I act on those things to harm someone else. So there's one theme. Another theme is withholding the truth is the same as telling a lie. Humans are the only animals who create their own problems. Is that true? Is that false? Or humans can't be trusted, so moral judgments should be made into law. What I mean here, I feel like I have to explain this one, is a moral judgment. Basically, you have this moral compass that tells you something is right or something is wrong. And maybe you can trust yourself to make that moral judgment, but can you trust other people? So if we didn't have a law that said it's not okay to kill other people, or if we didn't have a law to say it's not okay to steal from other people, those are usually pretty clearly, we can all agree that yes, those should be made into law. But what about laws that only affect another person? So drug laws, for example. Really, that person's only harming themselves. But should we kind of protect them from themselves and make stringent drug laws or laws against lifestyle choices? That's kind of what we're getting at for moral judgments. Okay. So those are just some of the themes that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to have you kind of respond to these themes with a personal response. And any of these themes could be answered with a simple yes or no, right? Privacy is more important than safety? Yes. Boom. Simple. But I want us to get to work on these ideas of developing and explaining our ideas and our positions, really getting to this concept of support, that I can use relevant information and evidence from my own life, from things that I've experienced, to back up my ideas. So what I'm going to recommend for our thematic response post up on Google Classroom, which is about a 150 word response to one of these thematic elements, is number one, brainstorm a little bit, right? You've got 150 words. For some people, that seems like a lot. For some people, that seems like not enough. So you might have to plan out your writing a little bit. So I'd start with just thinking, what can I relate to with that idea? What does it make me think of? And then think of some of the extremes. What if we had zero privacy? What if everybody had complete privacy? What issues would those cause in our society? So jot through some of those, see what you can come up with. And then if you're still having trouble, I love to use some of these starters where I would say, this statement reminds me of X, Y, or Z, right? And that would just get me starting writing, and I can talk about some ideas and keep developing them. And then when I get done, I just come back and I erase this statement reminds me of, and I just start wherever I started. And same thing with this and this. Use those as starters, and then when you're finished with your writing, come back and erase those words, and it should still work. Just a way to get going. All right, last two slides. I've got an example. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can pause it here. I'll also have it posted up on my website. Here's an example of what I'm looking for a thematic response. And then when you're done, I am going to require that you respond to at least two other classmates. So you have to read their response, understand their response. We're working on identifying their main ideas and analyzing them. Then you have to respond. And for this time, I'm going to make you use one of these 5 starters. Eventually, I'll open up and you can say whatever you want within reason. But to start us off, so we don't get one-word responses to each other, I actually want us to have a conversation. You'll need to respond to someone's post with using one of these. So while I agree with your point about X, I think this. To force us into a conversation. These are great ways to agree and disagree with each other. All right. Good luck, folks. I'll be around for questions.